guys, so today I'm going to talk to you about working at a bigger hospital versus a smaller hospital. I get a lot of questions from you guys, especially when you're considering what job you might want to do, what the difference is. So today I thought I'd talk a little bit about my two experiences at both. So I trained and worked as an assistant midwife at a tertiary hospital that did around 6,000 births a year. And then for my new grad, I have been at a smaller hospital that does around 1,000 births a year. So what I thought I would do is talk to my experiences and give you guys kind of the pros and cons, and then my final thoughts at the end about which I prefer. So if this is something that you're interested in, you think it might affect your midwifery career, or perhaps you're considering a job at one of the other hospitals, just keep watching. So one of the biggest differences would have to be with staffing. So there's a few things to unpack within staffing, but one of the biggest differences I noticed was that at a smaller hospital there was much bigger sense of community. I found the staff to be so much nicer because we really all had to count on each other to be able to kind of make it through per se. So I found that, yeah, all the staff knew you by name, and it wasn't even just like the midwives. There was an example where it was a little bit quiet when I was in clinic, so I went to pathology. They were really busy at the time, so they taught me to do a few tests, and I was doing some tests for them and answering the phones and calling up different wards, and I found that to be just like really fun and really interesting, kind of knowing them by name and having that fun. And that's perhaps some opportunity I wouldn't get at a bigger hospital. Also, whether it be like the PSAs or cleaners or people working at the coffee shop, you knew everyone, and I really loved that sense like you were coming home, you were in a family. This is contrasted to working at a tertiary hospital. I do take into the fact that I was a student or an assistant at both times, but I did find that because there was such a high staff turnover and different staff all the time, you didn't necessarily know people by names, and I found that people could be a little more harsh towards each other because you didn't rely on each other so much, and there was a little bit more coldness to it. That being said, one of the benefits of having a lot of staff was that you weren't often short-staffed. At a smaller hospital, I find that it is much harder to replace staff when you're short-staffed, and sometimes that could be very overwhelming. I also found if staff left, it's hard to get the position filled, so you'd be going months at a time without the needed staff. The next thing would have to be resources. When I was working at the tertiary hospital, it felt as though there was so much more resources. Of course, you're taking a higher number of women, you have higher acuity of cases, so it does make sense that you need more resources, but I found that contrasted with the smaller hospital that they were really lacking. Like, a lot of the equipment was a lot older, and a lot of the technology was a lot older too. In the same respect, at the tertiary hospital you had more specialized staff, educators on morning and night, more consultants and specialists in the area. So that was one major difference. The next thing would have to be the workload. At a tertiary hospital, I felt like it was a pretty heavy workload, but it was managed well because it was really good staffing, and things were very much followed to a T. In contrast, at the small hospital, I found that sometimes there is not a lot to do, and of course that's when you stock and clean things and find things to do. The hard thing was at a small hospital, for example, we have around 8 beds and sometimes just the 3 staff to look after them. So of course when those were all full, it was quite challenging. So I suppose there were like plus and minuses with that. The next thing was the acuity and the type of cases you saw. So of course at the tertiary hospital I was seeing amazing things: breech birth, twins, triplets, premature babies, babies with different conditions born and being able to be treated and managed. So that was really great experience. And in contrast, at the smaller hospital, I was able to see a lot more normal birth, a lot more normal women. That being said, anyone in midwifery can tell you that the population is changing. There's a lot more diabetes, a lot more obesity, and a lot more complexities in pregnancy because of this. So it certainly wasn't without complications. You still obviously had to manage obstetric emergencies because these are things we cannot predict. So often you were managing them with less staff and less resources, which was difficult. But it was a lot more normal, straightforward cases. The next difference would be the scope of practice you worked under. So I actually found that I was working more as a midwife and utilizing my skills more at a smaller hospital, where we're very encouraged to be able to cannulate, which in Australia as a midwife it's not a requirement when you graduate to cannulate. It's not something you have to do, but of course it's encouraged. With that as well, suturing, and a lot of the decisions you made were without consultation with the doctor, where it could be, of course, and you were a lot more independent in your decision making, which was not what I expected at all. A lot of the times it was just you responsible for the women. For example, the 2 postnatal wards I worked on had very different models of care. At the smaller hospital it was patient load, so you were responsible for 6 women, which at times could be very difficult, which is different to the tertiary hospital where I worked in team midwifery, which is where 3 of you were responsible for a zone, which could be anywhere from 10 to 15 women. So it was a bit easier because they would put a good skill mix in, and that there would be a senior midwife. You'd be able to consult a lot more. In the same respect, at the tertiary hospital, I remember we had a pediatrician button that you'd press when you needed the pediatrician there, which was completely different at the smaller hospital, where after hours there was no pediatrician, so you had to call like the head of the hospital, the medical officer was in charge at that time, and that was calling them, and it could take time for them to get there, so that was different. Leading on to that was the doctor coverage. So at the tertiary hospital there were 24-hour obstetrics and gynecology team, whereas at the smaller hospital from 8 to 8 you had to call them in. So of course this meant that as a midwife you were managing a lot of these obstetric emergencies with your team of midwives, because the doctors were around 20 to 30 minutes away. It also meant that often a more conservative management was taken. For example, if a woman looked she may need a C-section in 4 hours, but you weren't sure, the doctors would be more likely to make the call before they went home, so they wouldn't have to be called in. In the same respect, you had to call a theatre team as well, so it was being considerate of that fact. Another difference was the outcomes. So the smaller hospital, of course, I got to see a lot more normal births, but at the same time some of the outcomes were poor because of not having that 24-hour theatres and doctor coverage, so it was this real contrast. So I hope this has been helpful in giving you some little insights on how big and small hospitals can be. I'd like to say that there are positives and negatives of both. I've loved working at both. Right now, however, I've made the choice to go back to a tertiary hospital with hopes to work in caseload midwifery or midwifery group practice model, as it's also known, because that is where my passion lies. At the moment, I really want that privilege of following women through doing their appointments at home, things like that, and that's not offered at the smaller hospital because of course they have less resources. So that's why I made the decision to go back to a bigger hospital. Ultimately though, making the choice is very much where you're at in life. At the moment, because I'm so early in my career, I'm wanting to experience different models, get more experience, perhaps go into education. It's more beneficial for me to be in a bigger hospital. But something I could consider maybe when I have a family and kids and work's not necessarily my first priority, I'd probably want to work at that smaller hospital where you know everyone, you know you're going to have a good time at work, it's not as stressful all the time, and it's that real community atmosphere. If you have any more questions about comparing the 2 different types of hospitals, let me know. I'm happy to answer any of them, and if I get enough, I will do a story on my Instagram or a live on my Instagram, so make sure you're following there. Recently I'm changing everything up. I'm changing my names and things like that because I want a more focus on both antenatal education and student midwifery and the life of a midwife. I really want to branch out to do all of them because I'm passionate about them all. Thank you guys for supporting me and watching me. I'm now going to be coming back with more regular videos. I have lots of them planned out and ready to go, so look forward to them. And as always, if you ever need any help, just contact me. If I don't get back to you straight away, just keep sending messages. I promise I will get there eventually. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon in the next video.